Man, queen came out of nowhere. Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by and taking a look at my video real quick. I was having some people suggest Bobby Fischer versus Tigran Petrosian. Before I get into that, all of my people in the Philippines, maga nangu maga, maanyong buntog, masantos yakabosan, 9-bag na bigat. I think I might have said that already. Let me see, Mayad na agahan, and then there was another one that I had. It is Marhe na aga. I think I said that right. I think I got all of them. Yes, I got all of them. All right, so I think I got 6 so far. I just added Bikol. I think Bikol is how you say it to the mix. But all my people in the Philippines, mabuhay to you guys. I'm gonna tell y'all. I know it's like 7 o'clock in the morning, so you guys probably eating your breakfast. Kamusta na? Appreciate you guys very much. Anybody who is coming from the Soviet Union does not exist anymore, but Tigran Petrosian was a Soviet Armenian. So I say Vok Juven to you. Merci for coming and taking a look at my video if you do speak Armenian. Appreciate it very much. Just to give you guys a little bit of history on the candidates tournament around 1971. It was a completely historic series of tournaments and series of matches because Bobby Fischer basically just demolished the crap out of everybody that he saw. You know, when he was playing the candidates, interzonals and everything, the whole cycle was insane. And leading up to this match here, he just got done playing Mark Taimanov and Bent Larson, and he ended up beating Taimanov and Larson 6-0, like each of them. And so up until this point, you know, the World Championship cycle had never seen defeats like that. And these are world-class players. Like, these are literally like the top like 5 players in the world at that time. And then also, you know, these are players, you know, you guys have heard of the Sicilian Taimanov. You guys have heard about the Nimzowitsch Larson opening, stuff like that. So there are many different openings that are named after those 2 players. And Bobby Fischer just did them completely dirty. But yeah, so Tigran Petrosian was the world champion in 1966 until 1969. And then in 1969, Boris Spassky defeated him for the world championships. So after this cycle here, 71 and 72, you know, he plays Bobby Fischer and, you know, pretty much the match of the century is what they call it. So if you guys are ready to go, I've talked enough, as some people say. Let's go ahead and get into what we got for the game. All right, so we got E4, we got C5, knight comes to F3, we got E6, D4, pawn takes D4, knight takes D4, and we have A6. So we have the Sicilian Kan. It might seem like, if you're not familiar with the Sicilian defense, it might kind of seem like white is, you know, just like wasting a tempo with A6. But the problem that you have to be focused on is the fact that knight can come to B5. Also, when you develop knight to C3, it can also come to B5, and the bishop can also come to B5. So all of these different pieces that can land on B5, you know, it's just a little bit too dangerous to kind of leave them hanging out. You know, give them the opportunity to get to that square. So usually, and a lot, probably I'd say probably at least 60-70% of Sicilian games are gonna have A6 played at some point. And you guys are familiar with the Najdorf. The Najdorf is like famous for, you know, the A6 being the move. So we got bishop to D3, got knight comes to C6, knight takes C6, pawn takes C6, got castles by white. We got D5, striking in the center. Now the whole point of the Sicilian defense is to trade off one of white's central pawns for a black wing pawn, basically just to kind of disrupt their whole center coordination, because you do not want to let white get that E4, D4, and especially C4 setup, you know, going on. So we got C4, kind of a Maroczy bind type situation a little bit, but we got knight to F6, pawn takes D5, pawn takes D5, we have pawn takes D5, pawn takes D5, and then we have knight to C3. We have strapped black with a little bit of a weakness here, but the thing about it is a completely passed pawn. So it's not, even though it is an isolated pawn, it's not as weak as you might think. It definitely has some potential, some dynamic potential. So bishop comes to E7. We got queen to A4, And then we have queen to d7. And queen to d7 as of 1971 is the novelty of the game. You know, it's pretty logical. I mean, you do want to develop the bishop here and get it on like a nice long diagonal once the, you know, once this pawn moves or whatever. So moving the queen there makes a lot of sense. You can also take back with the queen if there's exchanges, or the bishop, I'm sorry, if there's exchanges. So, you know, you have a lot of options. Bobby Fischer doesn't really too much mind the tension. So he just plays rook to e1 because after what we saw in the game, which is queen takes a4, knight takes a4, now you have an issue with your bishop because, you know, of course you can't castle because, you know, you're just going to be dropping the bishop all the way. And that's not what we're trying to do. So you have to make a preparatory move before you do so. So we see bishop to e6. We got bishop to e3. And we have castles by black. Right. So like I said, I mean, you guys have a situation where, you know, black had to spend an extra tempo before they castled, you know, to put a little bit of defense with this bishop and stuff like that. So we got bishop to c5. White. Yeah, I mean, yeah, white is trying to get rid of the bishop pair. See if he can't maybe, you know, get into a more simple type of an endgame. We're in an endgame pretty much right now. You know, we don't have any queens left on the board. So we're trying to see, you know, if we can try to get some type of, you know, activity rolling on this pawn. So we got rook f to e8. We have bishop takes e7, knight takes e7. We have b4. We don't want to allow black to play a5. Get that out the way, bro. We don't want black to play a5 because it's going to prevent our expansion on the queen side. And we are possibly trying to make a pass pawn out of these two pawns here. So b4 just pretty much kind of stops it cold. You know, of course, if we do push pawn here, we're going to be taken after rook takes. We're going to have to move the knight, but we do have a completely passed pawn of our own. So we're trying to keep our options open with that. So the king comes to f8. We got knight to c5. Bishop comes back to c8. We have f3. Now, you guys hear me talk about all the time, you know, this knight can become mobile somewhere. You know, of course, it can't go there now, but, you know, it had the option before to possibly go here, try to cause some type of mayhem going on. So f3 just restricts the knight. So, you know, you're going to see this occur again in a minute. But, you know, that's always something you want to be thinking when you're playing your own games is like, you know, you try to think about what type of pieces your opponent has and what you can do to try to restrict them. Because, yeah, of course, you always want to play actively. You always want to have your own, you know, plans and stuff like that. But you do want to make sure that you're, you know, blocking your opponent's plans because sometimes their plans can be stronger than your plans. You don't want to get overtaken by that. So we got rook a to e7. We got rook to e5, just trying to place a little bit of an attack on that pawn there. And also that's restricting the knight as well because, of course, you know, the knight can't just move because you're just going to be dropping the pawn. So, you know, it's an attempt to try to keep this knight restricted in this movement as much as possible. So the bishop comes to d7. We got knight takes d7, rook takes d7. We have rook to c1. You know, so now white has control of both of these files. So they're doing pretty good. So the rook comes to d6. We have rook to c7. So that is like, I mean, it's not so monster of a move. I mean, white definitely has a nice advantage going, but it's just a very principled move. You guys hear me talk all the time about putting a rook on the 7th. It's also known as a pig on the 7th, you know, just to try to restrict the movement of the king. So now the king is kind of stuck. Well, of course, because of this rook, the king can't move over. But if you did take this rook out of the equation, like over here or something like that, you know, the king can't really go this way. You know, the king is wanting to try to get into the center of the board. It's similar to the queen. You know, you do want to centralize your queen. So when you get to an endgame, you do want to start bringing your king in. So the rook on the 7th is just trying to prevent that as much as possible. And then usually there are a lot of delicious looking pawns, you know, on the 7th rank. So it just attacks those. So we got knight to d7. We got rook down to e2. We got g6, and that is restricting the movement of the bishop a little bit. So we got king to f2. And king to f2, the computer has wanted king to f2 for a while. It said 4 or 5 moves ago, it's like, hey, man, do king to f2. I mean, you already created your little loop real quick. So, you know, go ahead and move the king up. So we got h5, preventing g4. You know, g4 is something that you might want to get in, like going into an endgame, because you can do, let's say, for example, h5 isn't played. Let's just say, like, you know, I don't know, what is this? Let's say this is played or something like that. You know, you can push this here, and then after maybe h5, then you can push pawn, and you're fixing this structure. So you're making it like pretty much making this be a permanent weakness for the game. So, you know, black is not wanting to see that. So they go h5. After f4, which, like I said before, is further restricting the knight, because now the knight doesn't have the ability to come to this square. So it pretty much has to just kind of go back home, or maybe it can try to jump over here or something like that. But we got h4, and this is just further restricting. Now, I mean, you can't push pawn because you're going to be looking at en passant. So it's undesirable. So we got king to f3, we got f5. So you're just trying to clamp down as much as possible. So it's a little bit better for white, but it's not like it's just like completely won for white. It's you still are looking pretty good for both sides, and it's not just you know, just a done deal. So we got king to e3, we got d4 check, and then we got king down to d2, and then we have knight to b6. Like I was saying before, you can either try to move the knight here or the knight here. You know, seeing if we can like maybe plop it down or something like somewhere, try to, you know, cause some type of havoc. C3 is looking kind of scrumptious because, I mean, you might you know, jump knight over to a4 and then kind of plop it down into c3. You know, you can possibly have a nice little outpost there, so maybe those are some possibilities that, you know, what Petrosian is probably thinking. But if you guys want to go ahead and stop the video real quick and see what Bobby Fischer plays to take advantage of an opportunity, go ahead and do so real quick. Okay, cool. So I'm going to be really sad. I'm going to cry if you guys didn't get this answer correct, because it's already happened once in the game. So I feel like it's just screaming to be played. Like, you know, the rook is like, dude, play me. All right. So I already kind of gave you a hint. So I already talked about before how this rook is on the 7th, right? So what is better than one rook on the 7th? Two rooks on the 7th. Like, you pretty much just completely immobilize your opponent when you put two rooks on the 7th rank. You know, the king always has to worry about, you know, a rook swinging all the way over and checkmating it from the back, because I mean, this rook is pretty much useless in the defense of that. And so it's just a picturesque situation. It's very, very fundamental to be able to put both rooks on the 7th rank, and it's just destructive. You can give up like a pawn or two, and that is just like so strong. So we see knight to d5, so it looks kind of like, oh, wait a minute, did I just drop a fork? No, you didn't, because these rooks are going to move. So we have a rook to f7 with check. The king comes to e8, and then we have rook to b7. And you have used checks to basically move your rooks out of the way. So it's like the perfect situation. And so those are the types of situation that you can get out of when you do put your rooks on the 7th rank. So we have knight takes f4. And then we have the very, very accurate supercomputer move, bishop to c4. And it is actually in this position that Tigran Petrosian does resign the game. Now, you're resigning because basically what your goal is as white is to move rook over here and then move rook up and just deliver checkmate. There really isn't much that can be done. You know, of course, if you move rook over, the king can't go over because that's just going to be mate. And the interesting thing about the situation is the fact that this square is held by this bishop. So that is your goal movement for your rook. So like, for example, like if we just see something like knight takes, just not caring at all, you're going to be seeing something like that. And then you actually have a cute mate that could come up. If rook comes over and says, hey, man, I'm going to defend f8. No, you're not, because after the rook goes and covers, you're actually going to be seeing bishop to f7 with check, forcing the king over, and then you're going to be seeing checkmate here. So that's a nice little checkmate that could come from that. And so as you can see, there really is no way to defend against this. The king cannot move this way because that's just going to be mate. Showing it real quick, that's just mate in 2. And then the king can't come back over because that's just mate as well. Not even you know, the fact that it's held by the bishop, just the fact that it's so far away from the king. So that was one of the games. I think that it was like 4-2 or 4.5 to 1.5 or something like that. That's what he did. You know, that's what he won against Petrosian with. And so it's just kind of insane because Tigran Petrosian was a world champion at one point. You know, about, let me see, what was it? 5 years before this, pretty much 5 to 2 years before this. So, you know, it's just kind of crazy to, you know, see you know, a world champion, you know, get defeated in this type of way. But as Bobby Fischer said, I mean, he was pretty much able to beat a world champion for like the past like 5 to 10 years. So, you know, he was always having the theories of the collusion and stuff like that. He's saying the Soviets were cheating and stuff like that. So, but anyway, this was a really like fundamental, like nice game, I think, where, you know, you had these rooks on the 7th. So always look for those opportunities when you can put a rook on the 7th, even if, you know, you're giving up a pawn. Usually getting 2 rooks on the 7th or even a rook on the 7th is worth at least a pawn or 2. So, you know, checkmate is the ultimate goal. So don't be materialistic. Always look for the checkmate. I don't even care about a queen. Like, you can look at some of the history of my games on chess.com. I don't even take queens sometimes in certain situations. I just go for checkmate because, I mean, you want to win the game. So anyway, appreciate you guys very much. Maraming salamat po sa nanonood ng aking ma video. Merci for anybody that's coming from Armenia. Appreciate it very much. And I will see you guys next time.